Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Industrial Community Development Committee. In attendance this evening is Councilor Melville, Councilor McGinn, Councilor Rosignol, and Councilor Turco. Also in attendance is Councilor O'Neill, Councilor Manning Martin, and City Clerk Tim Spanos. The first item on our agenda is covered recycling containers. If it's okay with the subcommittee, I'd like to leave that in subcommittee. Mr. Gamache was not available to come tonight. He is gathering more information about this, and I'd rather he be here than us to. I'd take a motion on that if that's okay.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilor Turco. You heard the motion. All in favor? Anybody opposed? That's a vote. Next up is item B, zoning amendment, section 4.2.5, uses. Is this Attorney Kelty? Attorney Jack Kelty, please. Good evening, Attorney
Good evening.
Kelty. How you doing?
This matter was placed before the committee as a zoning amendment which would provide for retail use, not big box, but minimal retail use in the industrial zone, in the IL zoning district. And the reason that I had brought this up was that a client of mine, Ray Felice, who's developing the old Chelsea Industries building, came in some months ago, last year, and we got a permit for wholesaling and a variety of things that tenants that he had at the time. None of them were retail. As it happens, we did cite Habitat for Humanity, and it turns out that Habitat for Humanity actually has a significant retail component, and many of you may have seen it in the paper 2 weeks ago, I think. There was pictures of the space where they're currently warehousing their product and want, if they can ask for a special permit, if this gets adopted, they would then come requesting a special permit from the City Council to be able to sell the materials that they've either collected at auction or have gotten from nonprofits or had donated, and they would then in turn sell them, and they sell them at such a significantly discounted price that they become a very important element of the habitat, which provides housing and various forms of assistance. When I approached the commissioner about Habitat being in there, we discussed the fact that there are a couple of retail components in there now that do not have special permits, and it's like Peabody Warehouse, Peabody Supply, places where they are wholesale, but there is also a retail element where I can go in and I can buy plumbing supplies, and they seem to have either preceded zoning in its entirety or been there since a time when zoning would allow retail in this zoning district. So we then discussed the fact that there were antique facilities that were in there, and it seems as though some of them, again, that building was being used for some folks that preceded the change where they took the retail component out. So I'm trying to reinstate the retail component into the zoning district, and then that would provide for the ability for Habitat for Humanity to come forward and operate their facility within the space that they're currently building out and leasing from Mr. Felice.
Thank you, Attorney Kelty. Is there anyone who would like to, councilors would like to tackle this? Councilor Turco, then. Turco, please.
Turn it off.
Turco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I understand, Jack, that it's for Habitat for Humanity, and obviously I love that idea. Nobody would speak against Habitat for Humanity. The issue I have and have had is the zoning districts, and I did look at it, I was wrong, there are none in Ward 1, but Ward 2, 3, and 4 have a significant amount of IL. Washington Street, Foster Street, up by the Perkins, up by the police station. And the one thing that I remember is when I first started on the council 2 years ago, Councilor Gravel had very eloquently spoken about the sanctity of zoning and how we needed to protect it, and how a lot of work was put into creating zoning, and that we shouldn't just willy-nilly change it. And I just wonder if changing it for one individual is the right thing to do. I wonder if this was Home Depot, if we would even consider it. So I do have some issue with it, and I guess on that, I'll open it up to the council.
Thank you, Councilor Turco. Councilor McGinn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first of all, I appreciate the fact that Councilor Turco suggested bringing this back to committee so we could take a closer look at it. And as he points out, the majority of these zoning districts are in Wards 2 and Wards 3. The areas that Councilor Turco referred to, largely the Rousselot area over on Winter Street, as well as up in Burney Street, Webster Street. Webster Street, again, another one of these situations that already has some retail happening there. And then this area that Attorney Kelty is referring to off of Pulaski Street. Generally speaking, I agree with your concern about opening up to the larger area. However, what they're looking for here is not Home Depot. It's specifically, it would be smaller than 50,000 square feet. So, although 50,000 square feet is not exactly small, it's also not Home Depot. So, based on the areas that I've seen and based on the activities that I believe are already going on there, I don't have a significant concern right now. It is by special permit, so we will have the discretion to look at these, and I know that that's not always the best backstop, but in this instance, I'm satisfied with it. So my feeling is that I plan to support this measure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other councilors? Councilor Melville, please.
Attorney Kelty, you had mentioned that there's other businesses operating within this space. Are they operating outside of? Would they have required the same zoning change that we're talking about right now to be, if they were originally going to go in there doing the same business practice?
If they did not precede the time when, there was a time when retail was allowed in the IP district, and if they began then they don't need special permits now. I do know that some of the antique facilities were not there at that time, so they technically probably ought to have had a special permit. They came directly to the council for junk dealers licenses. They were issued those, and I think that Commissioner Tallarico, took the notion that there were already in that same building, there were already some pre-existing non-conforming, so once you issued the junk dealer's license and the neighbors seemed so happy with that antiquing going in that direction, he didn't require it. But when we came forward for what was a significant retail component of the entire business, he pointed out that we couldn't have that permit.
Okay, so essentially they did come before the council. They went through the process. It was just established at that time they didn't need this similar change. So, okay, I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Councilor Manning Martin, I was hoping you'd have a comment, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Mr. Kelty, could you explain just a little further? I may not have heard you well enough. So what is the reason that Habitat for Humanity cannot operate there with a junk dealer's license?
I believe it's because they're going to have a cash register and they're going to have a a very retail component. They collect, it was, if you read the, were able to see the article that was in the newspaper, they collect and hold on to, and then right now they're warehousing, they're storing, which is allowed under the permit that I previously was able to get. However, when they were to open that retail store, that retail is not allowed by special permit. When I went to, I suppose I could have come for a junk dealer's license, as the antiquers did, but we never had in this building, there was never any kind of retail use. Chelsea Industries manufactured plastic bags or foam products, and they were not a retail use whatsoever.
So just because this is in a different building than the antique building, than the antique shop, excuse me, there's a difference? Because we're talking about the IL, we're talking about a zone. So I
IP.
guess I'm not following you, Jack.
IP. I'm amending the IP district.
I'm sorry, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
But you're talking about the zone, the district.
Yes.
But you're saying because I'm just trying to make this work, and I understand what Councilor Turco's concerns are. So where I'm just a little confused is the antique shop, you said is in a different building than this
Yes.
one?
They're in the
But it's
first
in the-
buildings on
But
the
it's in the
right.
same zone,
Yes.
and you're looking for a zone change. Why would the building be
Well-
any different if they're in the same zone? I'm trying to make this
Because,
work, but I
think that the answer to that is because there was never a retail component within the building that I'm in. So there's no provision for any kind of grandfather argument, even if it's a different antique business than the one that had been there before. So at this time, we're well aware that there was never a retail element in the Chelsea Industries building, and the building that my client operates out of. And so it was thought, why don't we clean this thing up, put retail by special permit so the council can review the uses and where they're going to be. And that's what brings me here.
And did the building commissioner say that you could not go that route with a junk dealer's license? Have you been?
I never inquired about the junk dealer's license per se. I was talking about, just the whole retail element, because not everything they sell, I don't believe everything is recycled. Not everything.
Yeah, I just, because I respect zoning and I respect the councilors and I understand their concern that we don't want to change zoning for one petitioner in particular, and then it would affect various other zoned areas throughout the city. And I'm just wondering if that would be cleaner and easier and would allow Habitat for Humanity to operate without such a drastic change as changing the zoning. I love Habitat for Humanity. I love the program. The owners are wonderful people. They do good work. I'm just wondering if it's cleaner and easier that way. Because I don't see a problem doing it that way. And unless the building commissioner told you you can't, I think I'd rather see you explore that route.
Well, I couldn't sell the new product. I know I couldn't sell the new product under a junk dealer's license. The junk dealer's license, presumes that they're recycled, refurbished, and much of what they do is that business. But they also have overruns and things that are virtually brand new that they can sell at a very discounted price.
Like what,
So
Jack? Like what?
I think...
You'll be educating me on that. I'm not aware of that.
I think the article quoted that there were appliances and things like that that are overstocks and overruns, or a place that's gone out of business and they've been able to get their hands on some brand new appliances and things like that. Tools.
Okay, thank you very much.
Jack, can you shut that, please?
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Manning Martin. Councilor Turco, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Attorney Kelty. Attorney Kelty, you keep saying that you're trying to amend the IP district. Your application says the IL district. So, I think we have a problem there. first and foremost. Last line in the application says, most notably, the antique sale use seems to be grandfathered in since many of these uses precede the ordinance change prohibiting retail in the IL zone. So we're talking about two different zones here. That's number one. Number two, in reference to Councilor McGinn's, thought that 50,000 square feet is a pretty large building, Councilor McGinn. And I'm sorry, it may not be of Home Depot stature. Maybe I went a little large with Home Depot, but 50,000 square feet is pretty large. And I know that we have roofs a lot in, on Washington Street, but I just wonder if it just opens us up. And we have the special permit process. I get it. Once we approve one, why do we deny another? I'm just wondering if it's the right thing to do. That's all. Thank you.
I know we're still struggling with hearing through this microphone. I apologize. Councilor McGinn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to point out the same thing as Councilor Turco. I'm getting confused about the IP. So it is IL, correct? Okay, because that's all I evaluated, so all right, that takes care of that issue. With respect to the points raised by one of the points raised by Councilor Manning Martin, I agree that nothing should be done on a business-specific basis. That's why in my earlier comments, I didn't mention anything about Habitat or any other specific business. Councilor Turco is right that we need to think that this is something good, a use that is good in all of these, or desirable in all of these areas. It's really not coming into my thinking at all as to trying to figure out a way to make this work for one particular business, and I think that's the wrong approach. You're right, Councilor Turco. 50,000 feet is sizable, and the more you repeat that number, the more it concerns me. So, I'm still leaning towards being okay with this, but you're causing me to think more deeply about it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor McGinn. Councilor O'Neill, please, and then Councilor Manning Martin. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to add on to Commissioner Turco's comment about the 50,000 square feet, it actually is a regulation football field without the end zones, so it's pretty sizable. I had to look it up. I don't really know those type facts, but I guess I share the concern that where we have a situation and, council has come before the committee to explain the situation. I question if it wasn't Habitat for Humanity and maybe another company that had this issue. That's kind of the concern. Do we really need to make this zoning change to kind of fix this problem? And that's just, that causes me some agita. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor O'Neill. Councilor Manning Martin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Council McGinn. And just directly, I'll say that's exactly what is going on here, so we can wrap it up any way you like. That's what's before us. So it's a zone change with that particular business in mind, and that's really what's on the table. So we can wrap it up any other way, but that's what's before us. So.
Thank you, Councilor Manning Martin. Councilor McGinn, please.
Councilor Manning Martin, perhaps you misconstrued my comments. I understand what motivated this request. The sole purpose of my comment is that to share with you that the way I consider it is not to view it based on that particular applicant, let's call it. I think it has to make sense in all zoning, in all these IL zoning districts, wherever they're located in the city. So that's I'm only sharing with you that that's the viewpoint that I'm taking on this. Thank you.
Yes, Attorney Kelty.
I just wanted to speak to Chapter 40A, Section 5 deals with petitions to change zoning. People that have standing need to be landowners who own land here in the city of Peabody. So I've identified my landowner, and then I've tried to give background to say what further prompts it. And it would be applicable, I think the council knows completely, it would be applicable in all the IL zoning districts and not just here. So while it's very clear that the impetus for this, the reason this came up is this particular use, but it could have been, you know, if Mr. Felitti were renting to Sozio or Douglas Appliance or companies such as that, they would be somewhat perfectly suited because of the nature of what it is they're selling for the IL zoning district. However, that retail component would have to take place elsewhere. So they could have equally have been a user, but we don't have them. So I just wanted to speak to the issue of, you know, why we identify, you know, a particular circumstance. That's what brought it all up.
Thank you, Attorney Kelty. I'd like to remind my fellow councilors that this was a recessed hearing, and the recommendation forwarded by Councilor Turco was that we meet in subcommittee to discuss this. So we therefore should have a vote to recommend back to the council as a whole what we'd like to do. So I'd like to take a motion if there's no further discussion. Any discussion? Councilor Turco, can you make the motion, please, and then we'll vote on it? Under section 1 there, Councilor Turco, on 4D. I can help you if you need it.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I have 8B here I'm looking at, as the application. Am I looking at the wrong thing?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Councilor Turco.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at 8B. Is that what you're referring?
That's what it's listed in under zoning amendment B, but if you go to 4D, which it originally was in our full body, it talks about the zoning ordinance, City of Peabody, by amending section 4.2.5. Why don't I read it? Am I correct?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have 4D in my packet.
That's okay. I'll read it, and it will be your motion, if that's okay by the council.
That will be fine with me, thank you.
Zoning ordinance, City of Peabody, entitled City of Peabody zoning ordinance adopted April 25th, 2011, and amended through July 18th, 2017, is further hereby amended, and we need to make a positive or negative vote on this by amending section 4.2.5 uses by adding the designation of SP in the IL light industrial zone in the column for retail facility of less than 50,000 square feet. So moved. Motion by Councilor Turco. Roll call, please. The recommendation is, we're recommending approval and we'll vote accordingly. Recommending approval and then we'll vote accordingly. We need to vote as a subcommittee so we can then refer it to the committee as a whole. If that's what we want to do. If we want to not advance it, we vote accordingly. If we don't want to advance it, but either way, we have to report back to the body of a whole. Councilor Manning Martin, you have a question?
Yeah, was the discussion over?
Asked if there's any further discussion.
Okay, I'm just trying to catch up here. Can I ask another question? This highlight through you to Jack, Councilor Kelty, on the table of uses that you included in this packet, it's highlighted, right? The use that you want to retail facilities,
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Correct? You highlighted the area that you want to be included in the IL, right?
Yes.
And in that, it says also includes food and also drugs, along with a lot of other things.
Right.
So does this council want to discuss that further? Because that is also what you'll be allowing in other IL. Food and drugs is captured in that definition of use. So I think that needs to be discussed.
Thank you, Councilor Manning Martin. Councilor Turco, please. Jack, can you shut your mic?
Mr. Chairman, through you to Councilor Manning, I have to say, I didn't even look at that, and that's a great point. There are a lot more parts of this usage that now even more so alarm me. I'm sorry, I'll speak closer to the microphone. I'll read the whole thing. Retail facility of less than 50,000 square feet in size, including but not limited to the sale of general merchandise, furniture, food, household goods, dry goods, clothing, hardware, paint, interior decorations, household appliances, books, tobacco, flowers, drugs, and antiques, including gift shops, department stores, variety stores, and newsstands. I don't know. You tell me. I don't think it's a good idea to change zoning and it is for one client, no matter what's stated here. It's in the application. The client's name is in the application. It's not the way we're supposed to do this, I don't think. But thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Turco. Councilor Manning Martin, please.
Thank you. And just along those lines, to further explain my concerns, is food. There's a lot of smells, aromas, what kind of food, and then you already have existing buildings and businesses in the IL that may not want those odors and smells around their product and their businesses. Paint, will there be odors in the same regard that disrupt existing businesses in the IL? And then finally, of course, drugs. What is that opening up? If we change, we're allowing drugs to be sold in the IL. What exactly does that mean? And given what's going on today with recreational and medicinal marijuana and things like that, I think we need to probably put the brakes on this. And again, I would suggest, Councilor Kelty, that you go down the avenue of perhaps the junk license for this business. And I wish you the best of luck in making that happen.
Let's try this again. Do we want to leave it in committee, or do we want to take a vote either positively or negatively to allow this amended use, and then which we have to do because it was sent back to us? So, Councilor Turco?
Mr. Chairman, I believe the motion was on the floor, so if I'd like to proceed with the motion to approve and see where the votes may fall.
You heard the motion that I read earlier by Councilor Turco. Roll call, please.
Okay. Councilors McGinn,
No.
Rossignol,
No.
Turco,
No.
Melville,
No.
Gould.
No.
Motion fails 5-0.
Thank you, subcommittee. I appreciate it. Councilor, you have another item before us, I believe?
The second item is to change the numerical trigger, which would apply to single-family residences from 15 to 30. And we've had some minor discussion at the City Council, and we've decided that this matter, as all zoning matters, should come to the subcommittee, and we're here now to discuss what we are going to do with respect to this particular petition. Now, the manner in which I've tried to approach this was to just change the number from 15 to 30, so that any subdivision of any less than 30 lots would not have to participate in the inclusionary zoning provisions of our zoning ordinance. At the Planning Board, they actually recommended favorably as to this, as they did with the previous matter before your consideration. This, there was an interesting proposition at the planning board. Dr. Judy Otto, who's a member now of the planning board and is a former community development director under Mayor Teresian, had pointed out that there was no incentive for participation in inclusionary zoning, and that there perhaps should be. And I think that one of the reasons she brought that up, there are incentives for some of the other elements. And I think one of the reasons she brought that up, is that if you examine zoning ordinances in other communities that try to provide for inclusionary zoning, they generally give a provision which would be some kind of incentive. In this instance, I've looked at the issue of would it be possible to create an incentive whereby you get a subdivision approved, presume that it's 24 lots. You now have to give 4 inclusionary zonings. Bring that subdivision back, and because you're going to participate in inclusionary zoning, you would be able to do an A&R re-subdivision of the large parcel of land where you would you would be able to create lots which had 75% of the frontage and 75% of the area. That would now create, but those new lots would not be, they would be incentive lots, trying to bridge the gap between the affordable housing and the market rate housing. When we had a provision but it would not increase the number of affordables. Your affordables would be frozen at 4, and then if you were able to get 4 more lots by reconfiguring them in this fashion, that would become your incentive, so you'd have 4 more market rate lots to be able to spread this disparity across. When I was doing some research, I found a series of discussions back in 2006 when this was originally adopted, and there was an incentive in terms of, well, there was an alternative provision, and it said that you could buy out. We've since gotten rid of the buyout provision, and I think part of the reason we got rid of the buyout was it was difficult to determine what programs you could be giving money that you got, or did you actually have to, as a city, did you have to buy, did you have to build these affordable units? And I think the city was well aware of the fact that they really didn't have any tracts of land that would lend themselves where the city would become the developer of properties. But even back in 2006 and 7, the guidelines were suggesting that the single-family homes would be 271, would be the, I'm sorry, a typically newly constructed market rate single-family home would be about 466 back then. The price of the affordable income household would be 226. So you would be able to come up with $240,000, give that to the city, and you would be able to not participate directly in the community, in the inclusionary zoning. That buyout, the disparity now, I don't think that our number has changed from 226, or perhaps it's at 240 for the affordables, when now our houses are mid 500s, even cracking, in some instances cracking 6, so that the disparity now is some $400,000. So perhaps a way, I don't think the city has an interest in putting back in the buyout provisions, because I think they were removed for a specific reason, and that might have been that we weren't going to be in the housing, we weren't going to be in the business of building housing. However, this incentive program might be able to narrow that gap if I were to be able to get, an incentivization with respect to increasing the number of lots, but not increasing the number of and not every subdivision, by the way, would lend itself to this. Certain ones just, wouldn't have the extra frontage, wouldn't have the extra area. So in the alternative, the committee might recommend that if this were not to be adopted as it's before you tonight, that perhaps we could explore incentives. And I think that inclusionary zoning packages that do not have incentive or alternative buyout, I think they're susceptible to some attack as being unfair and economically unfair, but also unfair to the landowner. But that's not a threat. That's not what these people that I'm working for this evening, that's not what the road they want to go down. They would just like to sort of narrow that gap between the cost of housing, cost of development, and the shortfall that would be realized by some $400,000 per unit.
Thank you, Attorney Kelty. Any fellow councilors? Councilor, can you shut that off, Jack, please? Councilor Turco, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney Kelty, I think I'm correct that this is brought forth due to a subdivision that is currently a client of yours is building in South Peabody at the top of Ralph Road and Pearl. I may be wrong. We also have another subdivision in West Peabody that may be affected by this, the Birch subdivision. Tell me why I would do this, because I can't for the life of me figure out why this even looks palatable to me in the slightest. And I understand you say this is unfair to the developers. Unfair in what sense? They don't make enough money and there's not enough affordable housing for people that can't afford houses? Because I think it's not so much unfair to your developer. I think it's unfair to people that are trying to move to Peabody and find affordable places to live. So if you want to talk about fairness, that's where the fairness is. But I'll allow you to explain it to me and tell me why a city councilor would vote to forego inclusionary zoning and create less affordable housing.
Said we had provided an analysis of a 24-lot subdivision in which we would see that the cost of construction, infrastructure, all of those things is all the same. The cost of building both units is all the same, and there's some $400,000 shortfall. It's just difficult, and I feel unfair that in a community where we want to provide inclusionary zoning, that all falls on the back of the developer, and there's no sharing in the sense of by trying to create an incentive. And if the developer wants to go forward, and you folks don't want to change this, then so be it. They'll have to buckle up and decide whether they're going to do it or not. But it's the disparity between the market rate and the amount of money we could yield under the affordable housing.
Right. Well, I appreciate the answer. I still don't understand how it benefits the city of Peabody to allow the change. And it's just another issue of changing zoning to benefit one particular client. And I wouldn't do it for 100 clients, but again, I would not vote in favor of this, but I appreciate the time.
Councilor Melville, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I was at that planning board meeting when this was approved, and I appreciate some of the creative ways, because housing is becoming such a complicated issue. But I've done quite a bit of research on this since that night, because I saw it and I knew that this is something that was going to come before us. And my understanding is that the petitioner is not looking to make creative advancements in housing for Peabody. They're trying to save money from having to pay more to follow our inclusionary zoning rules. And I would further that and state that this developer, who I went to an event that they held at Stonewood with all the neighbors, and he seemed he was listening, he was presenting his plans, but he bought this understanding that this was the rules of the game at the time. So if we're suddenly going to start changing rules that are financially going to benefit developers after they purchase, then that's a pretty steep step, I think. And also, from my I'm 32 years old, and I have friends of mine that can't afford to buy a house in Peabody. This inclusionary zoning was put in place so that folks could participate in new developments. They could participate in purchasing a new, well-built home in our city. So I am against this. I've been waiting to discuss this issue since I was at that planning board meeting because it really itched me the wrong way. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Melville. Councilor McGinn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is nothing about this proposal that appeals to me. I think it's going to make it harder generally for us to achieve our 10% goal and avoid 40B developments. I think it unduly shifts the concentration of affordable housing into other zoning districts. I don't buy the argument that is made here with respect to the financial modeling and as it relates to certain types of developers. I think that the impact of including affordable units in all types of developments has a negative impact on the financial model, but disproportionately shifting that to one type of development versus another is on its face unfair. So I absolutely will not be supporting this change. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McGinn. Any other councilors? I'd like to remind you that this was recessed and sent to our subcommittee, so we have to do the same thing we did on the prior zoning amendment request. If there's no further, Councilor Turco, please.
Mr. Chairman, I'll file the motion.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Move to approve that the zoning ordinance of the City of Peabody entitled City of Peabody zoning ordinance adopted April 28, 2011 and amended through July 18, 2017 is hereby further amended as follows by amending Section 6.11.2A applicability. A, general, by deleting the word 15 in the last sentence of Section A and replacing with the word 30, resulting in the following paragraph. Paragraph A, general, the provisions of the ordinance shall apply in zoning districts R2, R3, R4, R5, BN, DDD, and BC to all residential developments that involve the creation of 8 or more housing units, whether rental or ownership, and shall apply to zoning districts R1, R1A, R1B, that involve the creation of 30 or more housing units.
Thank you, Councilor Turco. Any debate on the motion? There being none, roll call, please.
Councilors McGinn,
No.
Rozignol,
No.
Turco,
No.
Melville,
No.
Gould.
No.
Motion fails 5-0.
Thank you, Attorney Kelty. Thank you, councilors. Take a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Thank you. We're adjourned.